Hi Grade 8s, these are the evidence of learning solutions for week 3, lesson 2, conversions and perimeter. Now when we try and convert between units, the two most important flowcharts we'll be using are these two here. On the left we have a flowchart for converting between distances, and on the right we have a flowchart for converting between areas. Now looking at our first question here, convert 1.2 meters to centimeters. The first thing we need to identify is that we're looking at a distance. So we will be using our left flowchart. Okay, let's write down 1.2 meters, and we need to convert that to centimeters. So looking at the flowchart on the left, to convert from meters to centimeters, we need to times by 100. So in brackets, our first step is going to be 1.2 times by 100 in brackets, and on the outside, we write centimeters, which is the unit that we're converting into. Our next step is just to simplify the brackets. So 1.2 times by 100, well, we move our decimal place 2 points to the right, and we end up with 120 centimeters. Our second example here is converting between two areas. So we have 3.5 meters squared to millimeters squared. So looking at our right flowchart, we're trying to get from meters squared to millimeters squared. And there are actually two steps. So we need to first convert from meter squared to centimeter squared, and then from centimeter squared to millimeters squared. So starting off, we have 3.5 meters squared, which equals 3.5, and our first step is to times by 100 squared. That reaches centimeters, and then from centimeter squared, we then need to multiply by 10 squared. We close our brackets, and on the outside are the units that we're trying to reach, which is millimeters squared. Now looking at these numbers, 100 squared, what does that actually mean? Well, that means 100 times 100 again. And very similar, 10 squared just means 10 times 10. So you don't have to write this step down, but it is a useful step to make sure you don't get it wrong. We can rewrite it as 3.5 times 100 times 100, because squared means that we have two hundreds, and then times 10 times 10. And then on the outside, of course, we have our millimeters squared. So this green line here, you don't have to write that step, but it is a good way of making sure that you're doing the right thing. Okay, so we have 3.5 times 100 times 100 times 10 times 10. Now an easy way of solving this is to count up the zeros. So in total, we have 2, 4, 5, 6 zeros. So our answer is going to be 3.5 times 1 million, because that's 1 and 6 zeros. So our answer will be 3.5 times 1 million. That will be 3.5 million, or 3,500,000 millimeters squared. So those two steps in the middle are not necessary, but they are a good way of making sure that you're doing it correctly. You can, of course, just use your calculator and jump straight to the answer of 3,500,000 millimeters squared. Okay, now let's have a look at calculating the perimeter of a rectangle. Now looking at this shape here, the first thing we'll notice is that we have 14 meters and 0.03 kilometers. Now because those units aren't the same, we can't calculate the perimeter just yet. So what we need to do first is convert them both into the same units. Now I'm going to convert that kilometers into meters, and that way I'm getting rid of any decimals. Now using our flowchart from before, to convert 0.03 kilometers into meters, we need to multiply by 1,000. And when we multiply by 1,000, we're moving our decimal point 3 places to the right, and so our final answer will be 30 meters. So I'm going to update my diagram now with 30 meters. So now that our length and width both have the same units, we can calculate the perimeter. Now we need to use the specific perimeter formula for a rectangle, and that formula is perimeter equals 2 times length plus width. And the reason why we use that formula is because we have two of the same lengths and two of the same widths. So all we have to do is add the length and the width together and then multiply by 2. So our next line will be 2 in brackets 30 meters plus 14 meters. Next we can simplify the brackets, so 30 plus 14 will be 44 meters, so we'll have 2 times 44 meters, and so our final answer will just be 88 meters. Now remember, this doesn't have to be meters squared because we're just calculating the perimeter. We're not looking at area just yet. Okay, looking at question 4. So we need to calculate the perimeter of a rectangle with sides of 15 centimeters and 13 millimeters. Now the first thing to do when you come across a worded question like this is to draw a diagram. So it's a rectangle, and we know the length is 15 centimeters, while the width is 13 millimeters. And once again, we'll notice that the units are not the same. We have centimeters and millimeters. So we need to convert them both into the same units. Now I'm going to convert the millimeters into centimeters. Using our distance flowchart once again, we know that to convert from millimeters to centimeters, we need to divide by 10. So our first line will be 13 divide by 10, and then outside the brackets we have centimeters, which are the units that we're trying to convert to. Very simply, 13 divided by 10, we move the decimal point one place to the left, and so we end up with 1.3 centimeters. Now I can update my diagram here with 1.3 centimeters, and because it's a rectangle, we know that opposite sides are going to be equal. So I can draw in my lines in the rectangle to represent the equal sides, and I can fill in 1.3 centimeters on the left and 15 centimeters on top, and now I'm ready to calculate the perimeter of this rectangle. So once again, we use the exact same formula, P equals 2 in brackets L plus W, and substituting in our values, our next line will be 2 outside of 15 centimeters plus 1.3 centimeters. Our next line after that will be simplifying our brackets, so we'll have 2 times 16.3 centimeters, and once again, it's not centimeters squared, it's just centimeters because we're looking at perimeter. On that note though, let's try and calculate the area of this rectangle. Now, as you should know, the formula for the area of a rectangle is just length times width. So looking at this same rectangle, we know the length is 15 centimeters, and we're multiplying that by the width, which is 1.3 centimeters. So very simply, we have 15 times 1.3, and our final answer is 19.5 centimeters squared. So just remember, just like 4 times 4 equals 4 squared, centimeters times centimeters equals centimeters squared. So don't forget, every time you do an area question, your answer should always have squared units. So that's how you convert between units of length and area, and how you calculate the perimeter and area of a rectangle.